government, there's a good chance you're not getting paid. The world's biggest economy has run out of money. It cannot even pay its own staff because the US government has shut down. This shutdown has entered its 5th week. That means no salary for more than 1 million US military personnel, thousands of air traffic controllers, and even some lawmakers. They may not get their paychecks. The US Department of War, that's America's defense ministry, has been forced to accept a donation just to cover salaries of the active troops on the front lines. We're talking about a $30 trillion economy that is struggling to pay its bills. Here's how America got here.
Vice President Vance says if the shutdown continues, it could be a disaster.
Look, it could be a disaster. It really could be, because at that point you're talking about people have missed 3 paychecks. They've missed 4 paychecks. How many of them are not going to show up for work? These guys are doing heroic things to make it work as well as it possibly can, but every single person that I talk to a word, they are worried that the delays are going to reach a point where it makes it very, very hard for the American people to fly.
He called their work heroic, but even heroes have limits. Every missed payday erodes the safety net that holds America's aviation system together. The people guiding planes through the skies are doing it while juggling second jobs, debts, and growing anxiety. For now, air traffic remains mostly smooth. Flights are still taking off and landing, but the risk is rising. Fatigue, stress, distraction, all in one of the most demanding jobs in the world. Officials say a single misstep could cause chaos or worse. So here's where America stands today. The world's richest nation asking for donations to pay its soldiers, its air traffic controllers, unpaid but still on duty, and its government paralyzed by politics. This isn't about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about people doing vital work without pay. And
It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. For the first time in modern history, hundreds of thousands of Americans are looking for jobs in Africa. Yes, the same continent once labeled as developing is now becoming the destination for opportunity, while the United States faces a crisis few saw coming. From Lagos to Nairobi, from Johannesburg to Accra, African companies are receiving a wave of applications from American engineers, tech workers, and entrepreneurs, all searching for stability and growth. Why? Because back home, the American dream is breaking. Unemployment is climbing. Debt is soaring. Major U.S. corporations are laying off tens of thousands. And as housing, healthcare, and education costs spiral out of control, millions of Americans are realizing something uncomfortable. The promise they grew up with doesn't exist anymore. Meanwhile, Africa is doing the unthinkable. Nations that once relied on aid are now attracting foreign talent, venture capital, and industry. Tech startups in Nigeria are pulling in Silicon Valley veterans. Renewable energy firms in Kenya are hiring U.S. engineers. And Ghana, Rwanda, and South Africa are building innovation zones that are competing directly with Western hubs. In 2025, Africa's youth-driven economy, abundant resources, and digital transformation have made it one of the fastest-growing job markets on Earth. And that shift is sending shockwaves through the global economy. Because when you see Americans applying for jobs in Africa, you realize the global balance of opportunity has flipped. The same story that once defined Africa's struggle is now defining America's. And this, right now, may be the beginning of a new global migration era, from the West to the South. It's one of the most unexpected stories of our time. For the first time in history, hundreds of thousands of Americans are looking for jobs in Africa. In 2024 alone, international employment platforms reported a surge of over 600,000 job applications from the United States to companies across Africa, in industries ranging from tech and energy to logistics and finance. A decade ago, that sentence would have sounded impossible. The U.S. was the symbol of economic power, while Africa was portrayed as developing. But today, the numbers tell a different story. In Lagos, a young Nigerian tech startup just hired American software engineers, not because of charity, but because of competition. In Nairobi, U.S., professionals are applying to African fintech companies after mass layoffs from Silicon Valley. And in Accra, universities are reporting an influx of Americans seeking opportunities to study, live, and work on the continent. So what's happening? Why are Americans, citizens of the richest country on earth, suddenly searching for opportunity in Africa? The answer lies in two words: economic reversal. For decades, the United States exported opportunity. Now, it's exporting people. And Africa, once seen as the periphery, is fast becoming the new frontier of global work and wealth. To understand this moment, we have to look at what's going wrong in America. In 2025, the U.S. economy is facing its most serious challenge since the Great Recession. Inflation remains stubborn. Corporate layoffs are sweeping across industries. Tech giants have cut over 500,000 jobs in just 2 years. Manufacturing is shrinking. And the American middle class, once the engine of prosperity, is collapsing under record debt and living costs. Housing prices have skyrocketed. A single apartment in major U.S. cities can cost more than an entire home in African capitals. Medical bills and student loans trap millions in cycles of financial stress. Even college graduates are struggling to find stable work. For the first time, younger Americans are asking a question their parents never did. Is there a better life somewhere else? At the same time, Africa's economic rise has flipped the global perception of where the future lies. Countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa are posting GDP growth rates double those of the United States. Digital infrastructure is expanding at record speed. African governments are partnering with global investors to build industrial zones, smart cities, and innovation hubs that rival the West. So when Americans scroll through job boards and see salaries, benefits, and cost of living advantages in Africa, it suddenly makes sense. They realize that Africa is not the stereotype they grew up with. It's the next big opportunity zone. Let's be clear, Africa didn't just get lucky. This transformation is the result of decades of reform, investment, and ambition. Across the continent, governments have been quietly building the foundations of a new economy. Nigeria is now Africa's top destination for tech investment, attracting billions in foreign capital. Kenya's Silicon Savannah is producing globally recognized fintech startups like M-Pesa and Flutterwave. Ethiopia and Egypt are expanding industrial exports, supplying everything from textiles to electric components. Rwanda and Ghana are competing to become Africa's clean tech and innovation capitals. And the numbers prove it. Africa's total startup funding surpassed $7 billion in 2024, outpacing Latin America and parts of Asia. Foreign companies are now relocating manufacturing from Europe and China to Africa to cut costs and tap into a younger, more dynamic workforce. But here's what makes it truly historic. For the first time, Africa isn't just importing workers, it's attracting them. American professionals, especially those in tech and education, are realizing they can build careers and even raise families in Africa with a higher quality of life than back home. In Nairobi or Accra, the cost of living is lower, communities are growing, and investment opportunities are real. For many, the Africa opportunity isn't just an adventure. It's an escape from the pressures of a system that no longer works for them. At the same time, Africa's governments are deliberately crafting policies to attract foreign expertise. New digital visas, tax incentives, and global talent programs are opening the doors to experienced workers, not just from Asia and Europe, but now from the United States itself. The message is clear: come build Africa's future with us. The reaction has been mixed: fascination, disbelief, and in some corners, denial. Western media outlets are beginning to acknowledge the trend. Major networks are running headlines like, "Africa becomes the new frontier for American workers." Analysts on Wall Street call it a sign of global rebalancing. But behind closed doors, U.S. policymakers are alarmed. Because this is more than a labor shift, it's a symbolic reversal of power. For decades, Africa's brightest minds migrated to the West seeking opportunity. Now, it's the West's turn. And that reality undermines one of the foundations of American global dominance: the idea that the U.S. is the default destination for success. Meanwhile, African leaders are embracing the moment. Many have welcomed American workers as a chance to transfer skills, strengthen industries, and boost innovation. Partnerships between African and U.S. companies are expanding, but the power dynamic has changed. Africa is no longer begging for investment, it's setting the terms. Even China, which has long invested heavily across the continent, is watching closely. Beijing sees Africa's growing appeal to Western professionals as validation of its own long-term strategy, that Africa's growth is inevitable and unstoppable. European nations, facing their own economic stagnation, are quietly exploring African partnerships too. It's a global realization. The future of labor, resources, and innovation is moving south. Economists call it the reverse migration wave. For the first time in 200 years, people from developed nations are moving toward developing regions, not out of desperation, but out of opportunity. The United Nations estimates that by 2030, Africa will have the youngest and fastest growing workforce in the world. That means more innovation, more consumption, and more demand for skilled professionals, the exact conditions that once powered the rise of America. For the U.S., this migration trend exposes deeper structural issues: inequality, stagnation, and political division. But for Africa, it represents validation. The world is finally acknowledging the continent not as a charity case, but as the new center of growth. The symbolism is powerful. Americans coming to Africa for jobs flips a 100-year narrative on its head. It tells a generation of young Africans that they no longer have to leave to succeed. The world is now coming to them. So what happens next? If this trend continues, Africa could become the world's most dynamic labor market by the end of the decade. Foreign professionals will bring expertise, networks, and capital, while Africa provides energy, markets, and population growth. It's a partnership built not on dependence, but on mutual opportunity. For the West, it's a wake-up call. If America wants to retain talent, it must fix what's broken, from unaffordable housing to failing education and inequality. Because the world no longer waits for one country to recover. The world moves forward, and right now, Africa is leading that move. The irony couldn't be clearer. The same continent once written off as the future of tomorrow is now the place where tomorrow is being built. As the headlines change and the numbers grow, one thing becomes undeniable. Africa has become the opportunity the world can't ignore. What was once a one-way street of migration has become a two-way highway of innovation. And as more Americans, Europeans, and Asians look toward Africa, one truth stands tall. The center of global opportunity is shifting, and it's shifting south. The question is no longer why Africa? It's why not? This is African Spotlight 24, uncovering the real power shifts shaping tomorrow's world.